Thank you and your companions with us on the YouTube channel of Nghe An Newspaper, the digital social publication of Nghe An Newspaper and radio and television. Right after this, we will come to the latest news that we have just updated.
British media reported that Moscow has officially appointed Colonel Storchenko of Ukraine as Lieutenant General of the Russian Army. The fact that the colonel of Ukrainian origin became Lieutenant General of the Russian Army has attracted media attention. Mr. Storchenko was born in the Kharkiv province of Ukraine and graduated from the Reconnaissance Academy in Kyiv. After graduating, Officer Storchenko was assigned to work at the 36th Cross Sea Defense Brigade of the Ukrainian Navy in Qum. Here, he was promoted from company commander to brigade commander. Mr. Storchenko also served in the Ukrainian Army as deputy commander of the Ukrainian Peacekeeping Force in Kosovo, KFOR. In 2014, after the Moscow Special Forces took control of Crimea, he transferred to the Russian forces, received Russian citizenship and was appointed commander of the 126th Russian Coastal Defense Brigade, formed on the basis of Ukrainian units in this peninsula. After the conflict between the two countries broke out in 2022, the Russian Ministry of Defense appointed Mr. Storchenko as the Chief of Staff of the 35th Army in the Eastern Military District. In 2023, President Vladimir Putin personally signed an order to promote him to the rank of Lieutenant General of the Russian Armed Forces. Recently, Lieutenant General Storchenko was appointed as the commander of the 6th Army of the Russian Armed Forces. Responsible for the Kupiansk operation in Kharkiv province, his hometown, this has stunned the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, General Alexander Sinsky. A senior officer of the Ukrainian army has now become the commander of the Russian army that is besieging the Kupiansk city in Kharkiv from 3 directions. Kupiansk is considered a difficult challenge because the Russian army has been attacking this place for the past 2 years but has not achieved a decisive victory. At this time, the Ukrainian military route in Kupiansk is entrenched on the Oskin River. On the other side of the river, the KF forces set up a multi-layered defense system and used UAVs to continuously respond to the Russian assault force. The Moskva forces applied a slow and steady tactic of water wearing away stone. With extreme patience, they used UAV reconnaissance 24/7 to search for fire positions, supply points, and anything suspicious on the other side of the river. The target instructions for heavy destruction and destruction were gradually eliminated, gradually hollowing out the enemy's solid defense line. Finally, the Moskva army created a hole in the enemy's defense line at Kupiansk. They did not conduct a large-scale landing operation that could have exposed the enemy forces to various types of precision-guided weapons and Ukrainian FPV UAVs, but applied a multi-point landing infiltration tactic along the entire Oskin River, starting to establish a series of small bridgeheads. Then each small assault detachment successively advanced to the other side. Indeed, Mr. Storchenko, who had served in the Ukrainian army, was the one who understood their tactics best and could find the most effective way to penetrate the KF defenses. As the Moscow forces continued to attack, the Ukrainian infantry became thinner and thinner and the defenses on the other side of the river also weakened. One by one, the fortresses were destroyed. The entire Ukrainian defense line in the Kupiansk was no longer able to resist. Lieutenant General Storchenko's command of the Kupiansk operation attracted attention in the Ukrainian and Western media, especially when the situation in the Kupiansk for the KF was deteriorating day by day. According to war correspondents, the Moscow forces controlled about half of the city. However, the advance is proving difficult because the Ukrainian army is putting up a fierce resistance. This is explained by the fact that the loss of Kupiansk is not only a visual disaster for Kiev but also a serious military defeat, opening the way for the Russian army to advance towards Vychansk and Chu. The Ukrainian army is holding its positions near the bus station, the city's central hospital, the local brewery and the police station, but once these positions are captured, the Ukrainian army will recover the battle. Recently, there have been reports of the Moscow forces encircling the city of Kupiansk from the west and advancing towards the villages of Sobolivka and Moskapka. In the past week, they have crossed the Kalisa Pass and penetrated into Kupiansk in the northeast. The Russian 6th Army has surrounded the Ukrainian defense group on 3 sides and is gradually tightening the pocket for the Ukrainian group here. The Moscow forces have opened the steel door to penetrate the Oskin River defense line. Many of the country's heavy weapons and mechanized infantry crossed the once impregnable Oskin River and advanced to the other side. The KF command was not so short of troops that it collapsed on all fronts. but as long as they concentrated their efforts on maintaining a continuous all-out assault or counterattack on some key fronts such as Porops or Konstantinovka, the other fronts would likely be overwhelmed. At Pors, the appearance of Ukrainian reserve forces helped the army prevent the enemy from continuing to break through on the flank, delaying the city's collapse. However, after the main Ukrainian force withdrew to concentrate on defending Pop, the Russian shock force, like a giant iron tongs, slowly but surely formed a major attack on the Kupians where the Ukrainian defense line was weakening very quickly. If Kupian falls, it will not be as simple as losing a small urban area with a population of 10,000 people, but it will allow the Russian 6th Army to reach the north of Kharkiv city. They can even cross the river and attack Izum and Vance. This is the domino effect. The Nobin nuclear disaster has long been considered the world's worst civilian nuclear accident and is one of only 2 nuclear disasters to be classified as the highest level of severity on the International Nuclear Event Scale, INES. The other disaster was the 2011 Fukushima nuclear power plant leak in Japan. It was through these events that people truly understood what radiation was, how scary it was, and the catastrophic consequences it could bring. If the accident at the Nobin nuclear power plant had not happened, perhaps no one would have thought to test the radiation levels of a normal apartment in a standard apartment building in the Soviet Union, where residents died one by one over the years. In the late 1970s, the Kuransky quarry in the Donetsk region of Ukraine, along with a series of other quarries, began to ramp up production to meet the booming construction demand. The Soviet Union at that time aimed to demonstrate to the world the speed of development and the level of prosperity of the country through the 1980 Olympics. Apartment buildings were hastily built to improve the urban landscape and demonstrate that Soviet people always lived in comfortable houses. However, these efforts required a large amount of basic construction materials. At that time and even today, stone cutters still use radioactive material meters to calculate the density of materials such as crushed stone in containers. Warehouses or conveyor belts. To operate this machine, people need to use capsules containing the radioactive isotope Cesium-137. Due to the great pressure to increase productivity, workers at the Karansky quarry accidentally lost a Cesium-137 capsule in the material meter. They did not know that it had fallen into the construction gravel, and it was eventually transferred to the construction of apartment building number 7 in the city of Gramato, Donetsk province. For the residents of apartment building number 7, owning an apartment was a dream come true. The building had hot water, modern elevators, and looked much more upscale than other apartment buildings of the same period. During the 1980s, 2 families lived in apartment number 85 for 9 years. But their joy did not last long. Just 1 year after receiving the house, the 18-year-old daughter of the first family suddenly contracted leukemia and passed away. However, family members and neighbors just thought it was an unfortunate event. A year later, the 16-year-old son also died of the same disease. And then their mother's turn came, and people began to feel that something was wrong. Many people who knew this family spread superstitious stories, claiming that the apartment was haunted, but such stories were not reported by the media. Doctors believe that the 3 people who died of the same leukemia were due to genetic factors. The city council then handed the keys to the apartment to a new family, whose fate was no less dire. In 1987, the family held a mass for their youngest son. The younger boy was also fighting for his life in the hospital. Both suffered from leukemia. This prompted the authorities to investigate. It was not until 1989 that experts arrived at the scene with a radiation detector to the room where the victims had been staying before they died. They were horrified to discover that the radiation levels in the apartment were incredibly high, enough to cause death. The authorities immediately removed the middle of the room, and a large section of the wall was transferred to the KF Nuclear Research Institute. There, they found a small stone, the same one that had been lost in the Karansky quarry many years earlier. This was the cause of the death of 4 residents of apartment number 7 and the impact on 17 others. The radioactive source was in a wall near the victims' beds. After the wall was removed, the gamma radiation in the building disappeared and radiation levels returned to normal. However, residents were not allowed to return to the apartment building. Authorities determined that between 1981 and 1989, 6 people died and 17 suffered health effects from radiation exposure. Building 7 still exists today. The incident is a stark reminder of the importance of safety regulations for radioactive materials and the need to promptly investigate deaths that follow a clear pattern.
Copenhagen Airport, Denmark's largest airport, was shut down for about 4 hours on the evening of 22 local time after drones were spotted. Police said on social media that Copenhagen Airport had temporarily halted takeoffs and landings due to the discovery of 2 to 3 large drones in the area. According to data from flight tracking service FL Radar, Copenhagen Airport, the busiest airport in Northern Europe, was shut down at 2026 local time. Accordingly, about 50 flights were diverted to other airports. Police are investigating the origin of the devices but have not provided further details. The airport has now reopened. However, airport officials said delays and some flight cancellations will continue. Passengers should check with their airline. On the same day, a spokesman for Norway's Oslo airport said the airport had also closed its airspace to monitor the drone. All flights had to be diverted to the nearest airport. The incident occurred just days after the check-in and boarding system of Collin Aerospace, a service provider for many major airports in Europe, was hacked, affecting operations at London's K Airport, as well as airports in Berlin, Germany, and Brussels, Belgium.